So Hare Krishna, welcome all of you all for our episode 4 of our Agents of Change talk show. So we have His Grace Mahatma Prabhu with us again. So last time we had such a deep and a meaningful conversation with Prabhuji. And Prabhuji, at the end, he agreed that he will have another part with all of us. And he's kindly agreed to be with us. So very, very grateful to His Grace Mahatma Prabhu for kindly accepting this invitation. And welcome Prabhuji again for this Agents of Change talk show. Hare Krishna.
Thank you. Nice to be here. Nice to see you all.
Yeah. So last time, we had like one and a half hours of discussion, and so much that I personally learned, and so many devotees who saw the talk were really inspired, and there were so many things to learn, because it's your 40 years of realized wisdom being in this movement. So today
52.
Really, 52 years. Amazing.
40 is not enough. 50 was better.
So all glories to you, Prabhuji. So today we'll do some follow-up questions of what we did last time, plus some new questions also which we couldn't touch upon the last session.
Okay.
Yeah. So I think last time we were discussing this point about how in a Vaishnav community there has to be a healthy culture of even pointing out mistakes or correcting mistakes. I think you did a entire seminar in your Facebook page or with some devotees explaining this concept that calling a spade may not be exactly the right culture. So how do you what's like the right culture when you see certain things wrong that devotees are doing? How do you correct without hurting them and without crossing the boundary of Vaishnava etiquette?
Yeah, I just read something this morning where a leader was saying that he's learning how. I'm going to answer it from the leader's perspective first, not from the devotee's perspective, because I believe it starts there. So he said he normally, because he's a leader, just defends himself if he's criticized. Well, this is why I'm doing it. And his defense may be true, but he realized that defending is not the best way to do it, but empathizing with the concerns and the feelings of the devotees is what he needs to do first. And then he can explain why he's doing something, and then he can listen. So in other words, let's say I did something right, but it upset you. So if I just say, well, what I did is right, so you shouldn't be upset, that doesn't address the fact that you are upset. And maybe you shouldn't be, but you are. Whereas if I say, I understand you're upset, I'm sorry what I did upset you, and may I explain why I did it, maybe this will help you. Something like that. So he, then he said something really interesting. He said, eating, sleeping, mating, and defending. He said, now I'm working, and this part of my life, he's older now. He said, eating, sleeping, mating is not such a big thing for him. He said, but the defending is the big thing. He said now in this part of my life, I'm working on the defending. So in my experience, and also I've read this in literature that helps corporations develop a better culture. And Krishna says it also, yad yad achariti shreshtas. What the leaders do creates the standard of the culture. So if you are in a temple or in a community in which leaders ask for feedback, take it humbly, empathize with any difficulties or pain that the devotees are feeling, it makes it quite easy for everyone else to do that, and vice versa. So, what I will get to answer your question how to do it, but I'm just saying if you have the culture intact, it kind of answers the question, because then it's not even a problem anymore, because it's part of the culture that we've learned how to take feedback, and devotees it makes it easier for the devotees to give feedback if they know you're going to take it, right? So, okay, so I just wanted to make that first point. For any of you who are leaders or who will become leaders, how you behave in terms of taking feedback and also giving it is going to pretty much set the standard for everybody else. That's just how it works. What the leaders do, everybody else does. And if the leaders do something wrong, it becomes right. You know, because, well, all the leaders do it, it must be right, even if it's not. Or if it's not perfect, it seems to be perfect because the leader does it. So if you are a leader, and if you stay in ISKCON long enough, most of you will become some sort of leaders by default, just because there'll be younger people to lead. So this is important, that you are setting the culture. Now, Bhaktivinoda Thakur said, if you criticize because you see a person's behavior is bad for others, it's ill affecting others, if it's ill affecting you, or you believe it's ill affecting the person, he said it's not considered criticism, because the interest is the interest of it's in the interest of maintaining or expanding Krishna consciousness. So at least a leader should understand that, and we should all understand that a lot of times what comes off as criticism is just good intentioned concern. Right? I'm concerned, well, you said this in class, I'm concerned it could be misunderstood. This has happened to me. I don't want to say all the time, but it's happened every few years. It happens that someone says, you know, what you said was okay, but it could be misunderstood. And I didn't know that. And I was appreciative that, so I wouldn't say it that way. In that particular country, for example, misunderstood. Or I say something and someone will say, well, other people say this. So then I realized I should have brought in both sides. So if I can take the feedback, if I'm mature enough to take the feedback as well-intentioned and beneficial for me to improve, that I think that's like foundational quality of a leader. And then it makes it easy for the devotees to give feedback, because it's almost like the leader is asking for it. You know, tell me if there's something wrong, I want to know. So having said that, in answer to your question, how to give feedback according to our etiquette and so forth, I would have to say that in some cases, the leader doesn't want feedback. So it doesn't matter what you do. It'll be taken as offensive. Or it'll be taken like, well, you're a young devotee, you have no right to do this, or what do you know? Which may not be the case. You may know a lot. You may have seen something that the leader doesn't see. So that has to be taken in consideration. I think a lot of times devotees will see there's a problem, but they'll say, if I tell the leader, they won't listen because I'm a young devotee, I'm not respected. What I would say to the leaders in this situation is that oftentimes feedback is not dependent on how long someone has been a devotee, because it may be something very practical or something material that this devotee happens to know about, right? Or oftentimes people join our movement with degrees which we as leaders don't have. So obviously they know things we don't know. And so a smart leader and a humble leader will recognize that. I'm working with people who know more than I do about certain things. I may have more experience in general, but they have specific knowledge I don't have. So I just heard something amazing yesterday. Maybe you've heard this. Raj Bihari was giving a class on conflict resolution, and he said, when there's a conflict, it's really helpful if while you're having the discussion, you just stop the discussion for a minute, for 30 seconds, to tell the devotee you're in conflict with, I really appreciate you, I really like you, I appreciate your service, you have so many good qualities. And I just want you to know that even though we're disagreeing, that doesn't change how I feel about you. Bring in the personal relationship. So if you have to present a complaint, it's always good to present it in a way in which you don't make the person feel that they need to defend themselves. I really appreciate you. I really like you, etc. But I'm thinking we could do this better in our temple. You know, would you consider my suggestion? You know, so as a junior, you always want to approach a senior with humility, and it always makes it easier. Because you have to consider, if you want to get your message across, how can you get it across so they'll listen? A lot of people are out there on social media getting their message across, but it's upsetting a lot of people, and often upsetting the people that they want their message to be heard by because of the way they say it, because they're just condemning them. So do you like to read a message about yourself being condemned for having done something, and you know the thing you did was not the way they are interpreting it or projecting on you? It's difficult, isn't it? I know why he did that. It's all pratishta. You know, that's why he's doing that. When in fact you were ordered to do that and you didn't want to do it, and it was a difficult service, and you asked 10 times every day, can I get out of this service? And you suffered a lot, and you ended up in the hospital because you were so stressed. They don't know that. They don't care to know that. They just care to demean you. And they're saying, you know, he didn't do the service well. And you say, I know I didn't do it well. I didn't want to do it. That's why I told them I didn't want to do it, because I can't do it well. I'm aware of that. And so does it make you feel good to read, to read that? No. But if they said, I know ACHYUT GOPAL is an amazing devotee, he's an amazing teacher. I love him in so many ways. And they've just made him the temple president of Goa. And I think that is not his varna. I think it's not the best thing. I think they should, say it like that you'll think, yeah, he's probably right. I'm not really or you might think, well, I am actually Chhatri. He doesn't know that side of me because he never saw it, so that's how you want to present. And I think the broader answer to this question is we're talking about Vaishnava etiquette in general. So it's not like, well, I'll just follow Vaishnava etiquette when I have to bring up a criticism. No, it's a general way of being. So if you have that culture in the temple from the top down, then the people going up will also have it because they'll see it, right? Isn't it? They'll see it being modeled. So that's what I find. It's like you can't, I can give you the right answer, but it may not work if the culture doesn't support it. So it's like if the culture doesn't support it, you have to go out of your way to present it very respectfully and humbly. And that may not even be enough because they may not want it. But at least you didn't make any offense if you do it that way.
Correct. You made this point that Bhaktivinoda Thakur has mentioned that if we have the intention right about the welfare of the movement and we point out certain faults, that's not considered criticism of devotees.
Yeah, if the welfare of others, even the welfare of that person, because he's criticizing, you think, well, that's not good for him, or it's harming you. Yeah, in either case.
Got it. But you do, yeah.
It's just criticism. Technically speaking, that could be accepted. It could be, in spite of you doing that, another devotee could accept it as criticism, which then becomes an offense of sorts, even though it wasn't an offense. So you have to be careful.
Yeah. You do workshops on forgiveness.
Yes.
So I'm sure that I've not attended these workshops, but I'm sure there'll be like long workshops and a lot of practical exercises.
Yes.
Can you just run us through some of the main points and activities of this workshop? Because this is such an important topic for everyone and for devotees to release, the resentment that they have in their hearts.
Well, I think I can explain one thing that will not only help you with forgiveness, it will help you with, I don't want to say it will help you with everything, although I feel like saying that. I'll say it for now. It'll help you with everything in your life, because in a sense it will. So unless you're coming to the workshop just as an intellectual exercise, to learn the topic, you generally, that's the minority. You're coming because you have an issue and you haven't been able to deal with it well. So I asked the students to write down what the issue is, just briefly. In 2012, I was promised this, and I, moved to this city and moved my family, changed schools. And after 3 months, then the devotee said, someone else is coming to do this, and it disrupted my life. And the person, the whole, just whatever happened, whatever you felt, you write that down, right? And especially how you feel about it. Well, I felt betrayed, angry. I felt that was a lack of integrity on his part. Or he broke my trust, and so on, right? And if at the end of the workshop you ask them to write their story, which I do, it's going to be a different story. It's going to be a story which becomes the foundation for their forgiving. I don't know why my computer is. Sometimes, I don't know. It's just, you see me freezing, right?
Yeah.
My video's freezing, yeah.
Yeah.
I don't know why. It's just, depends on the day of the week, the time of the day. So the whole workshop is meant to change how they see that event, so they can see it in a way which would foster compassion for the person, which foster understanding. Why did that person do what they did? Maybe that person who betrayed you was actually forced to tell you that, and he argued on your behalf over and over again to defend you, but you didn't know that. And he was just being ordered, no, we don't have the money to support this person. You don't know that, there's lots of background information behind why people act. Or maybe there could be so many reasons. That doesn't matter why. There could be so many reasons. And then you start looking at, well, maybe I have good reasons to be resentful. Maybe I don't understand the good reasons not to be resentful, but what is it costing me? So we go through the costs, and the costs are enormous. And then I say, okay, well, what are you getting from it? It's a pretty high price. What are you getting from it? And, what are we getting from it? Stress, anxiety, loss of Krishna consciousness, loss of relationships. So we start to look at it from a perspective of, this is not really what I want, even though I can understand why I'm resentful. I'd rather not be, and I'd rather learn to see if I could see it in a different way. And so then I asked them to feel, like, what does your resentment feel like? And the interesting thing about this is that we go through an exercise where you get in touch with, well, how does it feel and where does it feel in your body? And a lot of people can actually feel, right? I feel it like in my heart or on my chest or on my shoulders or on my head. They can feel it physically if they meditate on it. And then I asked them, well, give an analogy. What does it feel like? And like, I'm locked in prison, I'm drowning in an ocean of poison. My neck is tied with a chain to the ground, etc. Knives in my body. So, and then I asked them, I said, did you ever realize that you feel this way? And they all say, no, I didn't. So you're learning to see it from a different perspective. You're starting to see it from the perspective of the person who hurt you. You're starting to connect with, what are the consequences of this? You're starting to connect with how you feel and how horrible it is. And then we go into this amazing exercise, which this exercise came to me the morning of the second day of the workshop, the first time I did it. because I felt like I needed something more than I had. And it was the first time. And while I was in the temple, I said, I should ask the devotees, well, you've looked at it from you have your perspective, and we try to see it from the perspective of the person who hurt you. Well, let's try to look at it from Krishna's perspective. So then I asked them, just take the part of Krishna. And your partner will be you, and you as Krishna will tell your partner why I put you through this. Like what did I want to see come out of you by putting you through this? I wanted to help you learn how to see things differently. I wanted to help you understand that you needed this to push you forward, whatever it was, right? So that's like complete from the original story to Krishna's vision is usually 180 degrees, right? So as a teacher, even though I created these exercises, it was like Krishna just revealed to me these exercises. There's like 30 exercises. So then as a teacher, I'm watching it almost as if it's not my class. I'm just sitting and watching the responses and what's happening. And so after teaching it many, many times, I came to the realization of at least one of the things that's happening is they're rewriting their story. So when they come out, they have a story which supports forgiveness. When they came in, they had a story which supports resentment. So then, now I'll ask you and everybody listening, if you have an issue, whatever the issue is, whether it's resentment or anything, if you're not able to let it go, it's most likely, if not 99.9%, I don't want to say 100% because there may be exceptions, your story is supporting it, and whatever it is, I'm envious of ACHYUT Gopal, why? Oh, he's so this and he's so that and I'm not. That's my story. Like my life is deficient because of him. I don't think so, I think if he becomes a great failure in his spiritual life and his service, my life's not going to get any better. I don't think it really is. So you have to look at your life and your thinking process to see if the very thing you want to give up, you're supporting by the way you think and by your actions. And you can apply this to anything. Like what's your story? When you ever slip and fall, you'll have a story, which is just a rationale. Well, he was so this or she was so that, therefore I did this. Therefore, not necessarily. That's the story, right? Because you could rewrite it. Well, in the future, when he is like this or she's like this, I am going to adopt this attitude, which will support me in being able to deal with that situation. So I'd like to tell you a story. It's a really nice story. And you will like the story. It's about a bear. No, it's about a lion who was adopted by bears when he was a cub because his parents left him there alone. And little baby lions actually look like baby cubs, and they thought he was a baby cub. So when he was older, they didn't know what he was, but they thought something was wrong with him. They thought he was a bear, but they rejected him from the family because he looked like a monster. And, what are they going to tell the neighbors when they see that? Our one child looks like a weird animal. So they rejected him. Obviously, he's depressed, been rejected by his family. He thought that was his family. And so one devotee comes, sadhu, and says, hey, what's wrong? Why are you so depressed? And they said, well, because I realized I'm some kind of monster bear. And the devotee says, you're actually not a bear, you're a lion. And he doesn't understand. So they go through this conversation. Finally, he understands that you were never a bear, you were always a lion, you were adopted, therefore you thought you were a bear. And then when he understands that, his depression goes away, right? New story. I'm not a bear, I'm a lion. I'm the king of the jungle. This is good. So how much of our life is like that, where we have a story which we tell ourselves? Often these stories are just conditioned by our past and past lives. They're not true. Often we have stories about what's in Shastra. Prabhupada says something, you come up with, I just read something today. And a devotee was describing an event with Prabhupada and how this devotee was seeing it. And I don't see it that way at all. And I know that devotee. And I know that devotee's nature. And I understand why that devotee sees it that way. But that same Leela, I didn't see it that way at all. Well, I saw it partially that way, but not entirely. So stories are based on our conditioning, samskars, past karma. this, that, and the next thing, even our temples and how we hear classes in our temples, what's being taught to us. But when you have a story like I'm a bear, when you're actually a lion, that's not going to help you. So if you're disempowered, what's your story? Oh, I could never do this. You know, how many people have that story? I could never be successful. I could never this or that, right? So, but if you actually want to do it, you're going to need to change your story in a way that can support it. Now, some of you are saying, yeah, but what if the story's not real? Well, I can guarantee you that most of the I can't do this stories are not real either. So if it's a choice between two unreal stories, why not choose the story that could potentially support you rather than definitely guarantee a failure, right? And the mind can't distinguish a story that's true from false. So if you tell your mind, you know, I can do this, you'll do it. If you tell your mind, I can't do it, you won't try. So I think it's obvious. So that was one of my biggest takeaways, that we all create stories around something, and then we think we're objective. That's the other problem. We think our stories are objective. How can they be objective when by nature we're individuals and therefore we're all different? So, you know, so even though we're looking at the same verse, we look at it differently because we're individuals. So, you know, objectivity, even absolute, Krishna is the absolute truth, but what's your rasa with Krishna? How do you see him? You know, even that, even the thing we could never argue on, still there's subjectivity. So, yeah, that's my message. All of you who can't forgive, it's because you have a story which is supporting it. And you're going to have to change that story to something more compassionate, more understanding, and learn from that event. And then you'll see actually it was good. You may see that actually the event was good.
Yeah. So basically, by forgiving, if the maximum benefit we will get is we'll be able to rise to a higher consciousness. Krishna's mercy will come, you know.
Well, you know, it's interesting that you said that, because, you know, there is a paradigm that you rise to the highest consciousness as a byproduct of bhakti, which of course is true. But then you just said something, by being forgiving, you'll rise, which is interesting because it's also true. They're both true. Bhaktivinoda Thakur says, forgiveness comes from humility and compassion. And he said, you know, sometimes the devotee will say, please forgive me, I offended you. And if the best thing to say is, Prabhu, you know, I'm not like that important that I think I'm offended, or, you know, don't worry, I'm not offended. You shouldn't have to suffer on my account. Bhaktivinoda Thakur says, that's how a devotee thinks. He said, you know, the compassion comes in. I don't want this devotee to suffer. So if I say, yes, you offended me, now he's going to suffer somewhat for Vaishnava Aparad, right? So, and I don't want to see you suffer, and I don't want to see you suffer on my account, because who am I? That's his humility. So his compassion, I don't want to see you suffer. I don't want to see you suffer on my account. That's his humility. And so Bhaktivinoda Thakur said, well, when you have those two and mix them together, forgiveness comes out. So I forgive you, you know, even if I wasn't offended, still I will forgive you, just to make it official. So then he said something interesting, and he said, well, these three things are the basic ingredients of bhakti: humility, compassion, forgiveness. This is like the three ingredients of the kitri of bhakti. So will forgiveness manifest? Will humility? Will compassion? Of course, all these qualities manifest via bhakti. Do we need to manifest humility, forgiveness, compassion? Yes. Like you said, your bhakti will rise. So they work together, you know. Be forgiving, it'll help your bhakti. By rising in bhakti, it'll help your forgiveness.
Okay. But if there is a case in which, you know, there is a person who is hurting you again and again, I mean, what is the limit of
Oh
forgiving,
yeah, right. Yeah,
if
that's
someone is
difficult.
like breaking your trust every now and then,
Yeah,
then what do you do? Many times you have this experience that you withdraw in a shell, when you
yeah,
get repeated experiences.
yeah, right. Um, it's usually probably because that person cannot not do that, and there may be reasons for it, right? They may not be aware that they're breaking your trust, number one. In their world, maybe it's not, they don't define that as breaking trust. They may have a narcissistic nature. Doesn't bother them to break your trust, they don't feel your pain. There may be so many reasons. The way I personally dealt with this, it may not be the only way, but the way I personally dealt with it is that when I see a person that way, and it's repeatedly, and we all have tried to help them or reason with them or talk to them, and we understand that's just how they are, then we're going to assume they're going to continue to do that. And when they continue to do that, we have two choices. Number one, do we not want to work with them anymore? Or number two, do we want to work with them and just expect, when I milk the cow is going to kick. I know that now, so I don't complain. I'm not complaining about this cow. I'm just ready to get kicked. And, is the milk worth getting kicked? And, maybe some days yes, maybe some days no. But this cow is going to kick. If we understand people, understand their past and their psychology, and how maybe their past was really difficult and maybe they could not trust anybody and this is how they behave, then it makes it easier. And then you can decide, in some cases, you might decide that I actually like them and I can work around it. Or you may decide, at this point in my life, I just want to work with people I can trust. I don't have the bandwidth to work, or nature to work with people, or I don't want to create that kind of culture. So it's a decision you have to make. I think Prabhupada was much like that, accepting of people's nature. I mean, he tried to change us, obviously, but he really didn't try to change us that much. Oftentimes he just said, you go here and you go here. Didn't even try to get them to talk. Just, okay, you go here, because he could see they couldn't.
Got it. Yeah. One of the offense in chanting is to maintain material attachments, even after understanding so many instructions. But somehow this, even though in ISKCON we have been hearing so many lectures, still the deep-rooted tendency to enjoy, the material attachments don't go away that soon. What is the hope for all of us?
Well, this is an interesting question. And it goes back to the point that I made that when you read something, according to your subjective view, you interpret it in a particular way. And in this scenario, we can't maintain material attachments. Right? And like you're saying, but we have so many, attached to the body, attached to pride, attached to my 2 chapatis and a cup of dal, whatever it is, attached to I like my dhoti because it's a nice color, So Bhaktivinoda Thakur said, it's not exactly like that. It's chanting the holy name with the desire to increase one's material life. That's actually what it means. So, like sometimes devotees will say, is it okay to pray that I get this job when I'm chanting Hare Krishna? That's the offense. Is it okay to pray that I get this job if it's going to help me in my Krishna consciousness because it's less hours and more money and I can do more service and give more money? No, not really. Not really, as long as there's a mood of detachment. But during japa is probably not the best time to pray for it. But specifically, praying for that job because I'd like to have more money or more prestige, that's what he's referring to. To maintain material attachments, You see, the thing is, we're trying to give up material attachments. So a lot of our attachments are just conditioned responses. They're not conscious efforts. I'm not, you may sometimes have an attraction to something, but you'll never act on it because you're in your intelligence, you've already decided, I'm never going to do that again. But it doesn't mean that the fragrance of that attachment has left your heart. You're cleaning your heart, so the fragrance of the attachment is still there, so you can still smell it. And your heart is trying to tell your mind, why don't you do this? And your mind is saying, but I've already vowed not to do it, so I'm not going to do it. And you're wondering, why my heart is still feeling this if my intelligence has already decided not to. Well, it's just the part of the process of purification. So if we have attachments, but we're not acting on them, then technically speaking, we don't have them. Because whether we have them or not, if we're not going to act on them, the result in the end is going to be the same. I didn't act on them. So it's referring to more of that. It's just so devotees don't get like discouraged by this when they read it. Right. The other one is to think I am the body and everything is mine. And so, every morning I wake up and I'm fully body realized. Like I don't want to get out of bed. My body's tired. It doesn't, We're all like fully in bodily concept when we wake up. But actually we're not. Because if you're waking up to go to Mangal Artik or you're waking up to do devotional service, it's because you realize you're not the body. Otherwise, you just stay in bed and sleep longer, right? So, yes, we have false ego, false identification. I think I'm a man. The woman thinks she's a woman. I think I'm American. You think you're Indian. Yeah, we have that. But it's the same thing. But are we acting on that? No, we're engaged in devotional service. And in Prabhupada's definition, if you're engaged in devotional service, then you're self-realized. So if I'm chanting Hare Krishna and and I've identified, this is my family, this is my country, and again, I want to expand those things, those false identities, that's an offense to the holy name. And then what happens is, Bhaktivinoda Thakur says, you'll get those material things. That's what you'll get from chanting. But spiritually, you'll get nothing. You won't even get to Namabhas, Anartha Nivritti. You won't even get there. So I'm saying this not to take it lightly, that we shouldn't give up our attachments, but just to clarify it. Because if we don't, we can become really discouraged, right? Think, what's the use?
Yeah, thank you for the clarification. I read in one of your articles, probably this is like a personal question to you, but then I'm asking this because it can help many devotees who are struggling with many issues. I read in one of your articles somewhere long back that you had one particular attachment that you really felt was a part of you and you had to live with it lifelong, but then at some point you just got over it, right? So how did it happen? And I'm asking this because because every devotee is struggling with some, like you mentioned, conditioning, some sort of conditioning. Everyone is struggling with. So, and many times, when you keep trying and it doesn't happen, so how do you remain patient? How do you remain determined so that at one day, things can change? How do you keep that spirit and
I'm trying to remember what that attachment was. Because I had many attachments I had to give up, and different levels of attachment. Let me start here. When you give up something for the sake of bhakti, like the 4 regulative principles and other things we do, getting up early, not associating with non-devotees. There's so many things we do, right? It doesn't mean that the attachment to doing those things goes away. You can, like Krishna says, mityachara. You can be a pretender, a false actor. A false actor means you're acting, but inside, that's not how you feel. So a little bit of that happens, or a lot of that happens, when you become a devotee, because you stop acting, which is also the process for eliminating it subtly, is to stop doing it grossly. But it doesn't necessarily eliminate it subtly. It's not that you don't think about it, right? So I think the attachment that I was talking about was not that I was doing it, but I was thinking about it,
Got it.
like almost like, and it was funny because I knew I was never going to do it, but I was thinking about it because it was a big attachment for me before I was a devotee, you know. So, you know, it was just kind of coming to grips with this, like, why are you thinking about it? You're not going to do it anyway. It's just a waste of mental energy. And also, you know, what's the point of doing it? It's not good for you. The other side of that equation, because I can't remember because there was a few things. One side of that equation is, can I use this attachment in Krishna service? Because I can't give it up. And, you know, if it's like attachment to sports, you know, well, I'm attached to cricket. It's not really something you could use in Krishna service unless you become a cricket star and say, well, it's all Arjuna's inspiration, you know, something like that, you know, which I don't know. Maybe that would be a good preaching platform, maybe not. But you have to determine, can I even use this in Krishna service? And if you can't, it's like, well, then why just meditate on it? Because there's no outlet for it that is going to have any benefit for you. So, but then there's, I can use this for Krishna service. You know, I'm an artist, I'm a musician, I'm a writer, I'm an actor. I'm so attached to acting, I have to act every day, I'll go crazy. So I can use that for Krishna service. I can use that to illustrate Leela, to give people, you know, the feeling of the Leela. So that's a different thing. I've had to do both. Certain things give up, even though I was very attached. And I think what I was referring to in that book is I finally gave it up in my mind, like just like, kind of like, it's what I call the mantras. That's it. Like, just like drop it. That's it. Don't do this anymore. You know, it's not good for you. Just, that's it. Drop it. And you ask how to come to that stage. You can come to it intellectually, but you're going to also have to come to it through practical devotional service as well. So I think it's extremely important and healthy to be analytical. And Prabhupada was very analytical in the way he preached to us. Consider the pros and cons. Where is this going to take you? What are the ramifications? What are you getting from it? How is it hurting you? How do you feel about it? All these things. And a lot of times, if you're attached, you don't want to think about these things because you know if you do, you'll have to give it up. Isn't it?
Correct.
It's crazy. But that's what Prabhupada did with us. You know, look at what you can get by being Krishna conscious. Look what you're going to get by not being Krishna conscious. Look what you're getting from this attachment. Just more attachment, more suffering. So I have an analytical mind, so I think that way all the time. I'm always analyzing. And I'm happy I'm like that. My wife's not always happy I'm like that because sometimes I'm not actually on this planet when she's talking to me. But I think being analytical in the right time and place is good because you're always looking at pros and cons and looking at how it makes you feel, feeling it and considering how to deal with it. So, yeah, I'm trying to remember exactly what it was. I kind of think I know, but I'm not sure. But it's always been my experience that there's a certain point in my Krishna consciousness where it's just I come to this point, heart and intelligence together, which says, you know, it doesn't make any sense to hold this onto this because you're not going to do it. You haven't even done it anyway. You're just thinking about it because you like it and maybe trying to enjoy it mentally, but you're never going to do it. And if you did, you would just feel really guilty. So why don't you just drop it, you know? So I think the problem is we can enjoy something mentally, so we don't want to drop it. Well, if I can't do it, at least I can think about it, what it's like, right? So, you know, you can't become a brahmachari and say, well, I'm going to be celibate, but I'll just think about sex. You know, that's not a brahmachari. So we can apply that to anything. You know, if you're a devotee and you give up something, you can't give it up and think about it. That's cheating, right? It's drinking water underwater during a fast day, right? Nobody can see you. I don't know what you're thinking, ACHYUT GOPAL. All you know. But so if externally everything's pucka, but internally you're thinking the opposite, then that's cheating. And so when you come to that realization, it's like, okay, I should just stop cheating because, you know, I made these vows, I made these promises. So let me stop cheating and just do it. And it's a lot easier in life if you just do it than remain teeter-tottering.
Great. Thank you. Thank you, Pradesh. Okay. Another important question. You know, staying in a Vaishnav community, you know, we keep looking at people, as you said, from our own perspectives, you know, our own understandings, our own conditionings, and we try to judge devotees. You know, there is this judgmental nature that comes, you know, and it, you know, initially it is on the mental level, then it could be verbal also, you know, and you know, it leads to so many offenses among the Vaishnavas, which is like really detrimental to the path of bhakti. So what is like the way in which we can accept people the way they are?
Mm-hmm. You want to know the real answer? Accept yourself the way you are, and then you'll be able to accept other people the way they are.
I was supposed to come to that question next.
whenever we're trying to analyze, like, why am I so judgmental? You know, you're asking, you know, we're judgmental. And so I naturally think, okay, if you're judgmental, I want to ask you why. Tell me why you think you need to be judgmental. Like, why? Because you don't have to. It's not a survival technique, but you personally need it. So why do you need it? Where's it coming from? And then you start to reflect. And one of the main reasons is you judging yourself, right? So Prabhupada said, okay, you can judge yourself, just don't judge others. Be hard on yourself, be light with others. But there's the tendency of how you treat yourself, you treat others. Forgiving of yourself, forgiving of others. Can't forgive yourself, can't forgive others. So that's where I would start and say, are you judging yourself? And most likely, if you have a bad case of judging others, most likely you probably are judging yourself, right? And my next question, similar question, is why can't you just accept people the way they are? And you might say, same thing, because it's hard for me to accept myself the way I am. Yeah. Why can't you accept yourself the way you are? Well, it seemed like my parents never did, or my teachers never did, or my brother never did, or I had this concept from early on that I had to be better than I was. I'll tell you another reason, which is really interesting. And it's all these reasons will help you overcome it once you realize why you're doing it. If you are weak in a certain area of your life or an area of your consciousness, you want to be around people who don't have that weakness because they strengthen you. You don't want to be around people who have that weakness because they strengthen your weakness. So when you're around someone who has the same weakness as you don't like it because you don't want to be around people with that weakness. So it's like you feel like, why do you have that weakness? That bothers me. Why does it bother me? Because I have it, and I don't want you to have it because it makes it harder on me, right? As our acharyas have all said, the sieve is finding the sieve, what do we call it? The strainer. The strainer is finding fault with the needle. You have a hole. And so what the psychologists say, and I think we all have experience of this, is that when you have a particular problem and someone else has the problem, when you see that problem, it upsets you because it reminds you of your own problem, right? Like, if I'm overweight and I see another overweight person, it probably is going to remind me that I'm overweight and I don't like seeing that person. This happens a lot in marriage. When people first get married, their partners reflect back to them what's wrong with them. And it's not that they don't like their partner, but they don't distinguish it. They don't like their partner because their partner is just telling them what they're like or reflecting what they're like. So, when you know these things, when you can step back and say, oh, this is why I'm judging him or why I'm critical, then you can stop yourself because you realize it's not his problem. He is not my problem. I am my problem. He's just reminding me of my problem. So if you can do that, then it's quite easy to deal with because then you realize, okay, he's not going to change and it doesn't matter if he changes or not. It's not my issue whether he changes or not. What my issue is whether I change or not. And that's why Bhakti Siddhanta said, when others' faults misguide and delude you, then introspect, find faults in yourself. In other words, when you see faults in yourself and you work on it, it's the work, it's the real work. That's what can really help you. And to see faults in others, it doesn't help you at all. In fact, it harms you. It deludes you, bewilders you, misguides you. It's interesting, right? You know that verse, that saying, others' faults, and you see others' faults, it misguides you, deludes you. Wow. So I think a lot of honesty, self-honesty is required because I think when we're overly critical, we lack self-honesty. Because, if you're full of faults, why would you spend your time looking at others' faults? Only because you want to pretend you're not full of faults. And by looking at others' faults, you don't have to look at your own, which makes you believe you don't have them, that they're the problem. And all your problems are caused by them. And if you go down that road, it's the wrong road to go down.
Correct. Yeah, thank you. Thank you, Guruji. Actually, I was supposed to ask the next question only, how do you accept yourself? But I think you have covered both the questions well.
Well, let me add something to it. We did a workshop a couple of years ago in Mayapur. And part of the workshop involved the relationship you have with yourself, which a lot of us are not aware of. Like, how do you treat yourself? Do you let yourself down? Do you promise yourself you're going to do something, you don't do it? Well, then how do you treat yourself? Kind of disrespectfully. You promise yourself something and you don't do it. And we don't realize we actually have a relationship with ourselves. And every time you promise yourself you're going to do something and you don't do it, then the next time you don't even believe it when you say it because you already let yourself down, or especially if you've let yourself down a lot. Isn't that interesting? So when we talk about forgiving ourselves or anything ourselves that we do to ourselves, it's just an interesting concept that we actually have a relationship with ourselves. So after we did this workshop, so many devotees were saying, we talk about a relationship with Krishna, we talk about a relationship with Guru, we talk about our relationship with one another, but I've never, ever done a class in which we talked about our relationship with ourselves. And we're actually going to do a class. We're going to do a workshop on this. It's a self-care workshop. And, devotee care, what about self-care? Devotee relationships, what about relationship with yourself? It's going to be very, very eye-opening. I'll have to give you the details when we finalize it so you could let
Definitely.
your audience know about it.
Definitely.
But it's a missing workshop in ISKCON, self-care. We have a devotee care ministry, right? But you're also a devotee. And so it's not that you just care for other devotees. You have to care for yourself. Otherwise, how do you care for others? It's not that you just have a relationship with other devotees. You have a relationship with yourself. Do you take care of yourself? Do you chant properly? That's taking care of yourself. Do you read enough? Do you exercise? Do you rest enough? Do you eat properly? Do you fill yourself up with services that inspire you? These are all aspects of self-care. So that's the place to start when you have a problem with others. Do you have that same problem with you?
Yeah.
And the answer is yes, you do. And if you say no, you don't, keep searching for how you do. Because if you didn't, why would you be that way with another? Unless it's entirely just, as we said before, it's just to help them. It's not really prejudice. But there's another one thing I want to say also for you. In India, I believe, this is not meant to be criticism at all, just an observation, that everywhere around the world we have the caste system. It's just not articulated. Like in India, it's articulated, and by last name, by surname, right? It kind of tells your caste, right? So if you can get into a good university, you can break that caste, isn't it? You can, at least economically, you can change your. I think now, the new caste, the castes in America are all economic, some ethnic, of course, but economic if you get rich, you kind of break. You can be upper class no matter if you are or you aren't. But you're dealing with long traditions of casteism in India. So, subconsciously, just by knowing a devotee's name, you might think, oh, he comes from a Brahmin family, or he comes from a Shudra family. And so, we don't have that by names here in America. We kind of judge by what we see. We don't really judge before we see it. Although if I see a black person and I'm prejudiced, yeah, I see a Mexican, I'm prejudiced, I will judge. So we have that, that we have that kind of judgment. But I've asked Indian devotees, I say, is this a problem? And many of them said, yeah, it's a huge problem, because I was programmed as a young boy in casteism to see that we are better. I think one South Indian said his mother told him, you're better than all other Indians, something like that. I think it was South Indian. I don't want to, get in trouble. Maybe everyone's mother from every part of India told them that. I don't know. But he admitted to that. And he said, it's really hard because that's how I was programmed. So we need to be aware, you think, yeah, that's what my mother told me. She said, our caste is better, or our caste is worse. And now I have no self-esteem at all. Why? Because my mother told me we're from a low caste. So it works both ways.
Yeah, I think it's nice that you brought that topic about self-care also. Related to that, probably I have another question. Sometimes,
Okay.
you're doing your best in bhakti as far as, your understanding goes, and, you're really trying to put your sincere best in the process. But somewhere, there are moments where you feel still emptiness in your heart.
Mm-hmm.
You
Yes.
feel that your heart is not that nourished, and especially there are moments where you can really feel this. So first thing is, what does it signify? What does it mean? And how do we address this?
Yeah. Well, it could mean a lot of things. It could mean a spiritual deficiency, but it can mean a material deficiency. It can mean an existential deficiency, like I just don't have enough friends. I'm in a temple with a small number of devotees, and I don't relate to any of them, and I've always been extroverted. So it could be something, more obvious like that. It could be something deeper, like a need that's not being fulfilled, one of the 6 human needs that's not being fulfilled in a particular environment. I don't feel secure here. I kind of feel like I don't know the future of this temple. Is there going to be an ashram here? Or if I'm going to be able to stay in the ashram, what if they find out, I used to be an alcoholic before I was a devotee, they're going to kick me out. It could be so many things of needs not being fulfilled, or it can be a dysfunction on your part. I don't get enough recognition here, and I feel an emptiness because I need recognition. So it's really something you have to look at yourself. I think spiritual emptiness is more obvious. Like my rounds have not been good for the last few months. I feel empty, or I haven't been reading for the last few months. I feel empty. I think those things are a little easier to notice, but it also can be service, So let's say by nature, you are a teacher and a writer, and now you have to manage, you might feel very empty because you're not getting to act according to your nature. Now someone may say, well, shouldn't we do whatever we're asked? And the answer is yes, but not in a way that it brings you to this point where you're so empty you can't even do that service well. So at that point, you might just tell your authorities to say, you know, by doing this service, I realize that if I don't teach, I feel really empty. Or I realize that by managing, it just makes me feel empty, even though I do teach. You know? So it's, you're all going to have to reflect on what it might be. And it can be a combination of all of those. It can be ashram also. I'm in the wrong ashram. You want to hear something funny? This, I don't know, well, funny. It's just, well, it's kind of funny. A lot of times devotees will approach me with a problem like this, like you say, like an emptiness problem or a indecision. Indecision is also, I don't know whether I should do this service or that, go to this country or that, go to this school or that, get employed, this and that. And behind all that, I think often, not always, but often I think, the problem is this devotee's in the wrong ashram. And all this confusion, which seems to be the questions they're asking, is actually not the questions they're asking. The confusion is it's just the wrong ashram. And when they change the ashram, they'll land on the ground and they won't even have those questions. Or many of them they won't have. So sometimes that's it. It's just I'm in the wrong ashram. Well, once you're a grihasta, you can't do much about it until you get older. But if you're a brahmachari, you can do something about it. Grihasta, oh, well, I realize, what do you do if you're grihasta? I realize you're in the wrong ashram. Well, you know, talk to your spouse, see if they want to go into varnaprast, you know, like sooner than planned, or, you know, live separately or something. You know. But generally, it's not going to happen in most cases. But I'm talking more about unmarried people. And unmarried people, like some of them know they want to be married, but not right now. Some of them do not want to get married and they don't need to. And some do not want to get married and they need to, and they don't know they need to. So specifically those who will need it and are denying it, they can run into this problem. Even those who need it, but don't want to do it now, run into this problem. So, well, I'm still in school and I'm not ready and I'm young, but that's why they're so, because a lot of these questions you couldn't even ask if you were married because they automatically get answered. You know, where should I live? Where you get the job? Okay, answer that question. You know, what am I going to do? You're going to work all day. You know what I mean? So a lot of those questions are answered by Varna. You have something you want to share as a cause of emptiness that I didn't cover?
No, probably it could be because even lack of relationships, when you, as I told you, when you have like repeated experience about your trust being broken at different points.
Yeah. Relationship, yeah. Also failure, you know, if you fail in relationships or anything, or if you, let's say, if you don't succeed and you label it as failure, yeah, then that's going to create an emptiness also. Failed relationships. And if a good friend betrays you, yeah, naturally. But these are more like not common daily affairs.
Correct.
So, you know, you want to look to something which is more, it's something that you are facing every day that's causing it. Some things are beyond our control. I think, you know, when a certain politician gets in office and the country starts going in a way that you don't think is the way it should go, that makes you feel pretty bad, right? Makes you feel empty, like we need a leader here and we don't have one. And that can happen in the temple also. Maybe you have a good leader and the leader goes to start a new temple and the next leader is not as good as the former leader. That can create a kind of emptiness, which is, you know, it's not your fault per se, it's an existential situation. And all I could say is you have to find other ways to fill yourself up that maybe you didn't have to find before. The problem is, you know, a lot of times we focus on what's causing the emptiness and then it gets worse. So that we have to be careful of that. It goes back to the first point I made. you don't want to be in a consciousness and have stories that foster your problem. Why do you feel empty? But because my temple president left and the good temple president, this new one, he doesn't understand me. Okay, that's true, but that story doesn't help you. It just makes you feel more empty, right? So then you think, well, how can I deal with that? Well, I think I'm going to need, I've always wanted to do this or learn these verses or do this service. I think I'm going to need to do that and focus on that, because if I focus on this, it's going to disturb me. So part of the answer to your question is when you can't do anything, then you have to figure out, okay, how will you deal with what you can't change? You know, your best friend betrayed you. Now it already happened. It's past tense. How are you going to process it? You're going to blame him the rest of your life, or you're going to take it in some other way?
Correct, yeah.
So that emptiness can come from meditating on something that you don't like and not being able to pull your mind off it.
One more thing I wanted to know is, I think you have been visiting China for preaching, probably
Yes.
not now, but you have been visiting
Every week I visit by Zoom.
China.
I
Okay.
Zoom over.
So what's the experience of preaching in China?
The experience. Well, China is actually different now from when the devotees first went there. The obvious obstacle is that Chinese government does not mind if we practice, but they mind if we proselytize. So, we can't really have temples that are open to the public, so we don't have temples. And you can't just go out on the street and meet people. It's not what they allow. It's not what they want. They appreciate religion if religion helps the people, if religion is supportive of the culture, the Chinese culture and the Chinese values. But the government, controls everything. And so if a religious movement becomes very big, they may want to crush it because it could have power and they're concerned about it. So it's like they have no reason to fear us, but that concern is there for any religion. So it limits, what the government will allow us to do. It's not that we can't have programs in yoga centers and so forth, but it limits it. So devotees don't have the opportunity to do a lot of the services, the preaching services that we do in the West, in India and everywhere else. Going out, Harinam, book distribution, outdoor festivals, meeting people. That's just a contextual understanding. Most of the Chinese devotees were Buddhists before they became devotees. The next largest percentage were atheists, and then maybe some Christians, the minority. And the atheism in China is different than the atheism in the West. Because in most Western countries, we are raised with religion, or at least religion around us, so that the concept of God is not a foreign concept. For Chinese people, it's a foreign concept. I talked to some devotees who were atheists, and they said, they never even heard about God, that just the concept of God was not something they grew up with. So it's a different kind of atheism. It's not a conscious decision they made, it's just they never knew, which is why you would get more atheistic people to become devotees, because when they hear about God, they're like, oh, there's a God. Oh, okay, it makes sense. So that's kind of interesting. It's a country which is where people are. It's an ancient culture. They're respectful of teachers. They're respectful of authority. And from what I've seen, at least with the devotees I have, they want to understand how to do everything right. I think it's part of their culture. What's like the right way to do, every little detail the right way, which then can become a problem because then you get niyamagraha. You're looking more at just the right way to do things rather than the right consciousness. So it can be good if it's not overused. So they're very much, and they lack senior devotee association. I think that's a bit of a challenge. Where I'm living right now, there's about 100 disciples of Prabhupada. And of course, we as Westerners cannot live in China, but a few Prabhupada disciples visit there, a few once in a while. So they don't get that. That's unfortunate. It's a reality. And people of all kinds of people become devotees, all backgrounds, occupations, levels of education. And I think in many countries, as opposed to America, they have more of a religious culture, and they have more of a sattvic culture. So Chinese have Confucius, which is kind of like a sattvic philosopher. So it's not a religion, but it's a philosophy. So that has some influence on them. And generally they make decisions slowly. It takes them a long time to make transitions from what I've seen. And they like India. I know that. You've seen them in India, Mayapur, Vrindavan, Chinese devotees?
I've been to Mayapur. I've not seen them, but I've heard that they have come there. Yeah.
Usually they come around Gaur Purnim time. They're so happy to be in India because then they can freely practice. So, yeah. I think the nice thing about China, which of course is also true about India, it's not a Western culture. I'd say India is probably more of a Western culture because it's democratic, capitalistic, and we see it's adopting Western cultural values. But China is, although it's very Westernized, when you come in there, it looks like New York City if you go to Shanghai. But in terms of culture, it's not Western. In terms of values, it's not Western so much. It's because they have they're maintaining their own culture. That's one of the jobs of the government, to maintain Chinese culture. So that helps when you have a culture that has sattvic aspects to it. It makes it easier for people to make a transition from their ordinary life into the life of bhakti. When you have a very materialistic lifestyle and not a very religious lifestyle, then you have to jump through more hoops, and it makes it more difficult. Even after you become devotee, it can make it more difficult. We heard that Prabhupada said Chinese would come last, but they'll be the best.
Correct.
So generally what I'm seeing, that once they come, they stay. They're very, once, it takes them a while to come, but once they come, they're steady. I see more unsteadiness in the West. They come, they go, they come back, they go up, down. Chinese seem to be more, once they come, they seem to just steadily practice. Even though the cities are, wealthy and there's lots of opportunity for material progress, it doesn't seem to be a big problem for devotees. I don't know if that's what you're asking, but.
Yeah, I mean, just eager to know what's the preaching in China. How does it look there?
Yeah.
Yeah.
They do a lot of festivals and work in yoga studios, kirtans.
Okay.
A lot of yoga is very popular in China.
Mm-hmm.
Beautiful, beautiful yoga studios, yoga festivals. We were even invited to a business conference to do kirtan. I'm not sure why. I think one of the ladies who was a devotee was involved, or her friends were involved. And at the end of the business conference, we did kirtan, like of all things. You imagine that, in America. That would never happen. So it shows that Chinese people are open also. This was a straight-on business conference of business leaders and how to improve their business. And we did kirtan at the end. And a lot of these guys in suits were dancing. So, that's what I mean by they have a different culture.
Correct. Vijay, one last question for today. You are an expert on the topic of japa. You have done so many thousands of japa workshops. Can you give us some very practical tip and some of the thing that's like what you follow in your life that can really help one's japa?
Yeah, well, one of the, I think, biggest breakthroughs anyone can have is, and we all know this, but I don't think we know it deeply enough, or we don't reflect on it enough, is that all chanting is not the same. Just because you're chanting the mantra doesn't really mean you're chanting the mantra. And Prabhupada was very kind. So if you study Prabhupada's books, you don't get, this message is there, but it's not so overt. But if you study Bhaktivinoda Thakur and Srila Bhaktisiddhanta, this message is straight in your face. That this chanting without making an effort to avoid the offenses, without deeply penetrating, without the mantra penetrating your heart and prayer, without your connecting to what it means, you're not really chanting Hare Krishna. Or the way you're chanting it's such a reflection that it will take you lifetimes to make any advancement. So that sounds kind of discouraging, which is, I think, one of the reasons Prabhupada never said that. Prabhupada just said Krishna's dancing on your tongue. But the problem is, if Krishna is dancing on my tongue, no matter how I chant, why try to chant properly? Because he's dancing on my tongue anyway. So I can just, watch the news and chant Hare Krishna, talk to somebody, chant. So Bhaktisiddhanta said, and Bhaktivinoda Thakur said, the mere recitation of the alphabets, the letters of the names, the syllables, consonants, is not the holy name. But the holy name which is chanted with a desire to be a pure devotee, that's the holy name. And so some devotees think, well, how can that be? But Atasi Krishna Namadi, how could anything in Krishna consciousness not be Krishna when it is Krishna? It's Krishna, but it's not Krishna for you. I mean, you chant Gayatri mantra. Do you see Krishna in that mantra? Well, some people do. Are you worshiping Krishna in your heart, Mahaprabhu, your guru? Some people are. You may just fall asleep. So I guess it wasn't there. That's why you fell asleep. You see the deity for 3 seconds and go, okay, let's leave the temple room. I don't think you saw the deity. You didn't faint. You should have fainted. That's Krishna. How could you see Krishna and not faint? Bhagavatam says, how can you chant and not have symptoms of ecstasy? So it's kind of saying, if you actually see Krishna in the name, this is what will happen. You see him in the deity. The story of the Brahmin reading the Gita who couldn't read and tears all over the pages. If you're actually reading the Gita, that's what happens. So I think that's super important. Otherwise, we just take it, well, I chant 16 rounds. And if I could chant 16 rounds, then Prabhupada said 16 rounds, 4 principles, I'll go back to Godhead. 16 bad rounds and 4 principles where you spend your whole life meditating on breaking those principles? No, that's not what he meant. He meant actually following the principles internally, externally, and chanting, making every effort to avoid the offenses. That's what he meant. So this is, I think, the biggest problem that I see, at least with younger devotees. I mean like first 10 years or so, or even 20. It's just 16 is like, that's it. If you do 16, somehow or other, it's good. It doesn't really matter that they're good or not, or even the concept of good. I find a lot of devotees, they don't even know what good rounds are because no one taught them. They were just taught, well, just hear, just chant and hear. You're like, can you control your mind for 2 hours where you're just here? Not if you don't develop the right attitude, not if you don't know what the Maha Mantra means, not if you haven't really deeply understood what the offenses are and how to avoid them. So then you just end up chanting in your minds all over the place, right? You know that. We all know that. So that's what I find the biggest problem. And right in our books, Prabhupada says, Mayavadis are chanting Hare Krishna. Okay, is that chanting good? No, it's Namaparad. They're trying to become Krishna through the Maha Mantra. That's Namaparad. What do you get by Namaparad? Spiritually, nothing. You might get what you're asking for, but as far as prema, you're not getting 1 inch closer to prema. As we were talking before, I'm chanting and I'm praying to Krishna to become wealthy so I can buy a mansion. So what do you get by your chanting? Maybe you'll get the money, but you definitely won't get Krishna. You know, it's like Arjuna, you know. You want me or you want my army? So it's like, do you want a relationship with Krishna or you want his money? Right? So if you're chanting like that, then you get the money. So I read something really interesting the other day. Bhaktivinoda Thakur said, sometimes we chant and our mood is chant as fast as possible to get our rounds done. He said that's inattention, because one aspect of inattention is restlessness. So if you're just trying to get your rounds done, it means you're restless and just want to get them done. So it's the offense of inattention. That's pretty interesting, isn't it?
I do.
Yeah. So I think a lot of devotees are in that, you know, just get them done. Just get them done somehow or other. And my japa workshops are focused on explaining and clarifying the difference between what is really real chanting of the holy name and what is you're just chanting, but it's not real. You're not really chanting the holy name. It just sounds like it. So I don't want to scare anybody, but I want to scare you at the same time. And that's my statement to scare you. Are you just chanting or are you really chanting? Because if you're just chanting, 16 rounds of just chanting is not helping you that much. But 16 rounds of actually chanting, that's going to help you tremendously. And so many of your problems are going to go away. And if you have lots of spiritual problems, it's probably because you're just chanting, you're not actually chanting. Because if you're actually chanting, most of your problems, spiritual problems, they subside. That's why it's so important to attend japa retreats. We're going to do more japa retreats. We can invite you. I think the next one is going to be English and Hindi. So that's good. I'll have to give you that information, and then you can send it out to your listeners. Oh, it's we've got such good feedback. Just helping devotees learn how to actually chant and giving them the experience. Oh, this is what it's actually like. Oh, this is how you do it. I didn't know. It's like you come to America, ACHYUT GOPAL, and then after a few months you realize, oh, this is how they speak English in America. They don't speak it like we speak in India. I never knew that. I thought in America you speak it like we do. You don't. And once you learn it, you go, oh, this expression, that's an Indian. That's just the way you say it in Hindi, but when we put it in English, it's not the way they say it, right? So it's something like that. Oh, when you do it properly, oh, this is how you do it. This is what you experience when you do it. This is how you feel when you do it. That's what happens when you chant properly. And that's what happens in our japa workshops, which is why we do them. And once you realize, oh, now you know the right way to speak English. So now you just correct yourself when you go off. You go, oh, no, they don't. Americans don't say it that way. I have to say it this way. They don't pronounce that word that way. They pronounce it this way.
I was just 2 days ago, I was reading a book by Sachinandan Maharaj, The Living Name.
Yes.
So he was explaining there that like Chaitanya Mahaprabhu gives that example of a gardener planting the seed of bhakti. So he explains there that if you don't plant the seed deep within your heart, just like if the gardener plants the seed on the external surface, water or the wind may wash it away, the birds may come and just take the seed away. So similarly, if the seed of bhakti, the holy name doesn't go deep enough, then so many desires will come and just the seed of bhakti will just be taken
Yeah,
away.
yeah, yeah. You know, I don't know if I told you before, but there was a letter Prabhupada received from a devotee who had lots of problems. And Prabhupada's response was very, very telling. He said, I can see from reading your letter that you're making offenses to the holy name. In other words, you know, it's like if you were a doctor and a person said, you know, I have certain symptoms. As a doctor, you can understand. A lot of doctors can understand just by looking at your face what you're eating. Did you know that? They can look at your eyes, they can look at your face, they can look at your body and go, I know what you're eating. So it was a little bit like that. And Prabhupada's saying, I'm looking at the symptoms and I can know how you're chanting. These are the symptoms of Namaparad. Because if you were chanting properly, at least avoiding the offenses, Namabas, you wouldn't have these problems. Or you maybe you'd have these problems, but they wouldn't be very intense. They wouldn't bother you. So that letter is very telling because so many of us struggle with different things in Krishna consciousness and then say, okay, you're struggling with this. How are your rounds? Like, you know, if I'm the doctor of the soul, you know, say, you come to me, Mahatma Prabhu, I'm struggling with this. Okay, so I start asking questions. How are your rounds? Oh, not so good. Are you reading? Not so much. Do you do this? No, not so much. You can see. I say, oh, I could understand by the symptoms. You must not have been chanting properly. You're not reading enough. You're not doing this and that. So that's an amazing letter, isn't it?
Correct. Yeah.
Yeah. That's really something we can all remember for ourselves. And you know, always, you know, if I'm not doing well, first line of defense, you know, go to your japa, improve that, start there, you know, like that.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Mahatma Guru, for
You're welcome.
your precious time. And hopefully we'll get to meet again also.
Oh, yes. If I ever get back to India, that's another thing.